My name is Huck Stewart. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a learning design manager here for UT Online. And I'm very excited to spend some time with you today. We're going to talk about helping students engage in online content a little bit better. Um, I have several of you joining us remotely. Welcome. I don't see you at this point, so that I can just see my full screen. And I have a few people in the room with us as well joining. So we have a sort of a hybrid or a high flex sort of situation going on here. And I'm going to put you on the spot. So I have one, this is kind of special to me. I have one of my former education mentors here in the room with me today. So Brianna Iverson is joining us in person. When I was a seventh grade mathematics teacher, she was one of my teacher mentors. And anyway, so it's kind of special to have her here. She now works in career services, but okay, so a little bit about me. So as I said, I was a former educator. I taught mathematics. I taught seventh graders mathematics for six and a half years. I got a graduate degree, a master's degree in instructional design and technology from Utah State University, and ended up transferring over to Utah Tech, then at the time Dixie State University, and became a learning designer. I've been a learning designer for 4 or 5 years, and had the opportunity to then become a learning design manager. Now I manage a team of learning designers, and our role here is to help faculty, staff, students here at the university. Primarily, we focus in the online space, and we help collaborate with faculty to improve, enhance, create, develop online learning materials, content, courses, all of the above. We love speaking with you and talking with you and sharing with you. And so if you have any questions at any time, please do feel free to reach out to us as well. Joining us as well as a co-host is Dr. Terry Brandenburg, who is our manager for quality and training here at UT Online, and the director of quality and training. She's going to be admitting folks and monitoring the chat for us today as well. So thank you, Terry, for that. Just a quick shout out and introductions to the team. Such a remarkable team, all of whom have supported me in developing this workshop and who have done so much in supporting you, the faculty, staff, and students here. So I just wanted to give you, just make sure that they had the recognition they deserved as well. Okay, let's start with a thought here. This is kind of our warm up, or our bell ringer, if you will. I recently learned about Roman sundials from a podcast. What I learned is that for centuries, people would create Roman sundials, and then they would place them, all over. And a lot of times, the makers of these Roman sundials would etch in or carve in mottos in Latin that they chose to carve in. And what we've seen is that as you translate these mottos, they turn into for English things like "it is later than you think." A lot of times they're humorous. Sometimes they require you to think pensively. Sometimes they are somewhat dark and remind you of your limited finite time here on Earth. And some of them they're just humorous. And so the reason I wanted to start with this, and if you have the worksheet that I provided for you in the email, feel free to follow along and use that as guided notes today. But the reason I bring this up is because I've found that sort of contemplating and remembering that my time is limited here has motivated me to make decisions about what I use my time for. And I think that's going to play into our conversation a little bit today, because the truth is you and your students face that same reality. And we are constantly attempting to make a decision as to what we're going to spend our time on. And it's kind of our job to convince them that spending time working in our courses or in our content or in whatever it is we assign to them is worth their limited and valuable time. So it might be fun for you I just shared a link to the Wikipedia page where it had a list of those mottos in there. It might be fun for you to go find one yourself and select the one that you like the best. But the one I like the most is "it is later than you think." It's just, what time is it? It's much later than you think in life. This presentation is brought to you by Target. No, not really. But our goals today are to help you evaluate and improve instructional content. and effectiveness. We want you to explore best practices for enhancing student content interaction. And of course, I'd love for you to be able to walk away with at least one practical application that you can apply to your online. This is for the fall workshop for UT Online. This is one of a 3-part series. If you were able to get to the other 2 presentations later in November, that would be wonderful. The dates are of November 1st and November 21st. The times are to be determined. So look for invitations from those. We'll continue this conversation about improving student interaction with online courses. So a quick overview of where our team came up with this. So there's a theory called Moore's theory of transactional distance learning. And essentially an overview of that theory is boiled down to addressing communication gaps in distance learning. Now, this theory was sparked out of research that happened in the 90s when distance education started becoming more prevalent. And they've noticed, or the research suggested they've noticed, distances or gaps in learning as it related to students and the interactions they have in learning, primarily in the interactions they have with their faculty, as distance learners were no longer in the same room, being able to interact in the same ways with their teachers, but also interactions with their fellow peers and interaction with the content itself. And so it's broken into 3 different interaction topics: students interacting with content, teachers, and students. And so, we thought it would be fun to kind of get a closer look into each one of those. Now, I think the danger here, and this is something important to remember, the danger is that when we're developing online content and online instruction, all 3 of those, student to student, student to teacher, and student to content, are all sort of in congruence with each other, and they really function best when all 3 are applied at the same time. And some key terms, and this is important to remember, we're going to be talking a lot about student to content interaction today. And content really, to me, can be like all of the above, right? Like text, website, images, data, video and podcast, VR, simulations. And so when we're talking about how do we enhance student to content interaction, I don't think that much doesn't apply here. So what's the problem? What are we trying to address today? Why do students not engage in content? Now you may, so I'll give you a hint. I am one of these 2 people in this photo here. The other person at the time this photo was taken was my fiance. We are now married for 11 years and have 3 children, and we look just like we did then. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story about me as a student. I was a really good high school student. I wasn't like a straight A, like 4.0 student, but I was really good, and I did everything my teachers ever asked me to do. In fact, that was my entire like pre-higher ed educational approach. I did everything the teachers asked me to do. I learned 2 things when I got when I started my undergraduate degree here at Dixie State University at the time, or it was actually Dixie State College still at the time. The first thing is that I couldn't do it all anymore. I no longer could have it all. I learned that the student requirements, academic requirements, job requirements, relationship cultivation requirements, sleep requirements, and health requirements didn't all fit into my timeline calendar every day. It is later than you think, as they say. I learned that I had to start eliminating or sacrificing things that were no longer of importance or didn't bring as much value to me. And I thought, oh, I used to be such a good student. I'm no longer a good student. When really I discovered I was quite the average student. In fact, I think most of you might resonate with you as well. You have all discovered that there are things that just aren't worth your time anymore, or that maybe they were and no longer are, or maybe you have to prioritize certain things. And so for me, priorities were relationships first. Sleep was second. Health, eating, usually third, and then school, and then my job. It was a part-time job at the time. School was lower on my priority list. And so the second thing I learned is that, and I learned this really quickly, I didn't actually have to do everything the teachers asked me to do. Now, this is bizarre for me. This is very strange, and I apologize. I have to apologize to my former educators. You are all wonderful teachers, but listen, when I spent the first 2 weeks of my undergraduate career reading textbook after textbook and chapter after chapter, only to discover that I was not assessed on the things that I consumed, I learned that I no longer had to do everything until I suddenly had to do it. And what I learned, and this is probably a thing I shouldn't have learned, but I did learn it. Welcome, Elon. Is that I didn't have to buy textbooks, at least not right away. And in fact, there were at least 2 different courses that I can remember off the top of my head where I got through the entire course and passed without ever having to purchase the textbook. I saved myself about $800. And so I'd like you to keep that in mind. I think I was a good student. I was an average student. But the question is, why do students not engage in our content? Like, why? What was my motivation? What did I learn? I want you to do this exercise. If you have access to it in that workshop, I just want to think about it for a second. Create a list of reasons. We call them excuses that we hear from our students. You all are so connected to your students. You know your students very well. What are students telling you why they don't do something, why they didn't read that thing, why didn't they watch your lecture video, why didn't they complete that assignment, why? Like, we want to know why. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. And I think you'll discover that a lot of times, and we hear this, there are a lot of excuses, and some of them are really good excuses, and some of them are not very good excuses, and all of the above. But I'd like to draw our attention today on the things that we can control. What is within our control? So I'd like you to even consider sorting things out. Okay, why didn't a student do this? Maybe their life is hard. Is that within my control? Why didn't students do this? They didn't understand how to do this. Is that within my control? Right? And you can kind of think about this. This is actually a really helpful exercise to remind you what students are going through and to help you focus on improving what you can improve on. And in the interest of time, I'm going to just show you the list I came up with when I did this exercise. You may not agree with this list. You may agree with this list. There may be gaps or things that we're missing here. But outside of our control are things that I hear or that I've seen people talk about it. Oh, yeah, like students' lives are maybe hard or unsafe. They're not getting their immediate needs met. So, of course, my course isn't going to matter to them. Maybe students are getting to us unprepared. The high school program or the high school system is just no longer what it was, and they're getting to us and they are not ready for my content anymore. Well, okay, all that stuff is sort of outside of my control. And there may be a few things that kind of fit in both categories, but what is within our control? For me, if students are telling me they don't know what to do, how to do it, why they're doing it, when or where to find the information, if they don't know how to access or ask questions to me, or they're not getting feedback, or they're not sure how to get feedback or what to do with that feedback, to me, that is stuff that's within our control to fix as learning designers and as educators. And so I'd like to keep our focus on those spaces today. So, solutions. Well, here's sort of the less sexy solution, right? Like, nobody wants to be told this, but here it is anyway. The first thing I would always recommend to faculty if they are having students that are not engaging in online content is let's not think about students for just a moment. Let's think about our content. Do you know, as a teacher, why your students are supposed to do this? Why are they supposed to read this thing, complete this assignment, watch this video? What's the why in your mind? And then the next thing I'd challenge you to do, or just encourage you to think about, is how do you articulate that why to your students? And not just the why of, like, I don't know. I think about, like, okay, if I'm a math teacher, because I was a math teacher, and somebody said, well, why should I learn math? Well, because when you become an engineer, imagine telling 7th graders this, when you become an engineer 15 years down the road, I've already lost them, right? Like, they don't care, and not 7th graders, I get it, but like, they sometimes cannot care or do not care about what's going to happen 4 or 6 years down the road. Now, we hope they do. We hope they have this sort of vision. But also, why does it matter to them now? Why is what they're learning or what they're engaging in or using their valuable time on bring value to their current lives right now? It's a huge question to ask. And it's as easy as it sounds, maybe a little more challenging to make that happen in an online course. And so we're going to explore examples of what that might look like. And then some practical applications, some practical considerations to put in here. You know, here's some advice that we often do, or sort of like, we'd say like usable, sort of tangible things you can do with some content right now that would make students more likely to engage with your content once you establish the why. But then I think we're just going to look at some examples here. Okay. So let's get into this more of a workshop format. So that was my sort of 15-minute presentation. I apologize, I even went over a little bit further than I wanted. But what I'd like to encourage you to do now, if you have a computer in front of you, which a lot of you do because you're watching me through a computer. So, but those of you who are in the room, if you don't have one, that's fine too. I'm just going to share my screen as well. But go ahead and access one of these two courses. Now, I think the first one as a link should allow you in. It's gonna prompt you to like enroll as a student if you want to try it that way. Now, if you'd like to have access to this, like to the content here in this course today, you can actually just go to Canvas Commons link and then like insert it into like a sandbox course somewhere. This may take some time. And we'll just look at a few examples. Now, what I'd like you to do at this point is I'll keep talking because I can talk all day. But if you want to just go off on your own and start looking through some of these examples, feel free, okay? Otherwise, I'll just share my screen and we'll just kind of point out a few things that we're seeing. And what I developed is examples from live courses that we see here at the university in some cases. And then I created like a non-example. So the non-examples aren't like real examples, but I wanted to show you a compare and contrast, like a non-example compared to like maybe a potentially good example. And I challenge you to think critically about these examples because not all of them check all the boxes of like good instructional content all the time. Like we still are always iterating and improving our process. I would argue that no online course is ever completely done. There's always something to improve. But nonetheless, I think some of these are going to be good examples that maybe you'll be able to see and walk away with. Okay. We'll keep track of our time here because we want to make sure I give you the last slide with some materials. Okay. So here we go. Here's an example of maybe a political science degree. We want students to interact with the content. Here's an image that kind of breaks down the Electoral College. There is instructions to go to this like article and read it, and then we're going to discuss it in a discussion board. Okay, so this is the non-example. It's still fairly good. I mean, people may still do it. Students may still do it. But let's take a look at the of how to improve this. How do we increase engagement in this course? Well, the first thing I want to point out is simply this. A lot of times in online learning, we have to be super transparent. I've heard it said that we need to make the implicit explicit. What that's to say is when we're in face-to-face and we're around a bunch of people and we start talking about the importance of like the Electoral College or understanding the system in which we live in, it may be more intuitive or implied as we're discussing with our students why this is important or relevant to their lives. Maybe it's not. But in online learning, that implicit just doesn't carry through. We have to be explicitly clear, this is what I want you to do, and this is like why it's super important to you. Like at a minimum, give them a statement to focus on or think about. Introduce them to content topics. Now we get to play around with a few things, and I want to point this out. Questions to consider: question prompts, guided notes, a little bit of an interactive image. So we're encouraging students to interact with data here, and images, and links, and questions. And then we have discussion prompts that encourage students to think critically about it, bring in their own experiences, bring in their own value and why. This person even chose to give you good student examples of maybe what a post might look like, making the criteria as clear as possible. And then making it really clear how the faculty intends to interact with the students once the posting and the discussions begin. Kind of a fun example there. We'll move on to the next non-example. Here's a very common one. Here's my lecture video. It's 47 minutes long. please watch it in preparation for the upcoming assessment. Oof, I am never watching this ever. I have a price, and if you paid me to watch this, I would. But 47 minutes is not. It's not going to happen. Okay. And by the way, I just found this random physics video on YouTube. So this is Nettie, one of our instructors, and I'm sure this instructor is actually quite dynamic. I'm like, I actually watched like maybe 2 minutes of it. Seemed like kind of fun if you were into that sort of thing. But let's look at an actual example. Now, this one actually comes from a Physics 2110 course. Dr. Sam Tobler gave me permission to use this one. And what you'll see, again, context, importance, topics, instructions, contextualizing, making things clear and transparent. And you'll see 4 lecture videos, no longer than 6 minutes, discussing the same topics. So video chunking is actually a very significant way to help improve student content interaction and engagement. And I encourage you to watch Sam's work here. This is the work of actually combined effort of the learning designer. Let's say Dr. Sheen Wong and Jordan Ellsworth were helping with this course. Our media designer, Kevin Harris, helped with the video production, and then Sam brought in the talent, as we say, right?
So these instructors can reach out to you to get help with their video.
Yeah, for sure. If so, Terry, if you didn't hear Terry's mention here, again, our team is here to help support faculty with ideas such as these. So if you have thoughts and you want to develop something, come talk to us about these. All right, here's another one. Here's a very common one. Here's a slideshow. At least this one's embedded in the course. I don't have to actually click the download button and look at it as a PDF first. But this one's embedded. Here's a slideshow about ancient Greek pottery. Instructions, review it, and then answer these questions, and then post a paper about it, okay? Again, 35 slides. I don't know. I might brush through them. I don't know how well I'm going to study it personally, me. But again, you know the kind of student I was. Versus ancient Mediterranean ceramics interactive activity. So the instructor spent some quality time putting information onto why understanding, ancient pottery is going to matter to them, or what they may be able to do with it. And then down below, we actually have an example of an interactive slideshow or an interactive ebook that allows students to kind of explore through topics from various regions, kind of understand and collect information. I think in some cases, I still don't like some of the lengthy content embedded in some of these videos or some of these sections, but we have an interactive. And then some follow-up guided questions. And then in essence, one of the things that students benefit from this is that they get to check their knowledge immediately. So they consume the content, they review the information, and then they get immediate feedback as to whether or not they're understanding the material by essentially interacting with questions. Apparently, I'm really good at this.
That's too good answer.
Okay. Here's an assignment for reading a chapter of your textbook. Read chapter 5 of your textbook on evidence-based practice. Okay. Now, from an actual nursing, Masters of Nursing course, evidence-based practice reflection assignment. First of all, and I would argue good instructional content is often going to evoke an emotional response. If you were to interact with this, you will see some videos that certainly bring back memories that may be actually quite even haunting or difficult for some folks, as it brings back and sort of puts in a timeline the phases of evidence-based practice and how the medical medical professionals took information from COVID-19's pandemic and had to modify or revise or work through this process until they finally came up with a solution. So just interacting with that, I would be willing to bet that a lot of students, I mean, these are little short videos.
China has
and they just go through and kind of interact with these as it's introducing them to this concept of evidence-based practice. And then built right into here is a guided reflection. Now, this looks all fancy because it's built into the course, but I would argue you could have students accomplish the exact same experience by just giving them a document with these questions on it and allowing them to sort of reflect on these questions in their own space as notes, and then have them submit it somewhere. So like a guided reflective note-taking process as they interact with these. And then we're nearly up on our time. This is an interesting, so theater production. Hey, watch this video and then read this chapter, right? Pretty common instructional approach here. How can we improve this? Well, context, transparency, helping students try to connect to their current realities, guided questions, guided notes. And in this case, the faculty member who helped me design this one is a part-time theater instructor, and Russ Saxton, and he was really interested in letting students kind of explore theater spaces in unique different ways, especially their online students. When he taught this face-to-face, he would actually just walk them down to the theater spaces here at the university. We no longer had that option. And so how do we allow students to interact with them? Okay. Well, these are just some examples. I'm going to stop here. Okay. It is now 12 o'clock, and this is essentially the end of our presentation. What I wanted to share with you is this last slide here. Oh, no, I didn't want to share it. I wanted to slideshow it. There we go. So there's some tools and resources that you can download. These links are found both in well, here on the presentation, but also in the workshops sort of guided notes page. If you ever want to go through and download those, you're welcome to. The one that we created is essentially like a guided worksheet that prompts you to consider like the reason and purpose behind an activity or an assignment you're giving. But some of these are kind of fun and interesting examples. I hope you're able to take away something from this workshop. And if you were unable to access any of these materials, just email me and I will just send you links to the materials so that you can have access to them at a later time.
So if you're still here at the very end of this video, you get a bonus. I ran out of time in our 30-minute workshop to showcase a few additional examples. And so for the next 1 to 2 minutes, I'm going to quickly go over the additional examples. This is a very common sort of math approach. This is a special case for me because I was a mathematics educator, and so I actually think about pushing back on traditional ways in which we educate students in mathematics. If you look at this non-example, you're going to see like a textbook that has like content and information about parabolas, and this is essentially the textbook. This is just graphs and images and examples, and it's all well and good, like it's well and good organized content and information, but this is not going to be a student content interactive experience that's going to be very quality. There's just so many flaws with just giving people textbooks and saying, here, go ahead and consume and learn this material. And so if we try to update this idea actually comes from a teacher who was a high school mathematics educator, Dan Meyer, and he calls it his 3-act series. And so what he did is essentially provided a small miniature 30, that's a 1-second video with a question prompt. He provides that information to his students and asks them to engage either asynchronously or synchronously, if this is a live course, in just simple questions like, is the ball going to go in? When you provide hooks that make students want to guess and make students look at this and go, oh yeah, like, yes, maybe no, then you've automatically hooked them into this thought. Now, this is still parabolas. This is certainly not teaching deep concepts of how to apply theorems or algorithms to graph parabolas, but this is a stepping stone. This is where we start as we engage students with interactive content. There are several steps here in this process. You kind of guess what you think, you make a prediction, you get people to invest. Then you ask the students to engage in a conversation that requires them to ask the right questions. What information would you need to know to determine whether or not this ball was going to go in. And by so doing, you're getting them to essentially seek out the relevant information for themselves. What would you need to know? And now we prompt them to explore. And so there's this interactive activity. So now we're actually playing around with graphs. And you can imagine an asynchronous student, just exploring this and kind of going through and answering questions and just tying the real world into mathematics, like the real world into mathematics, using animations, using interactive graphs is a really powerful way to get students to engage with content in a more meaningful way. The last two examples I have here are actually, neither of them are non-examples. They are both just interesting examples that I've found to be highly engaging content. And I wanted to share with you what online learning's potential could be for students. So if you take a look at this, so this is from a music course where students are prompted to interact with this music tree. They're actually asked to consider their own personal musical heritage or their own personal musical experiences to get students triggered onto what's important to them so that they can tie in the musical information they're going to learn. This one comes from a music professor here at the university. Well, this is an interactive that allows students to kind of explore the roots of music from early African American or European or Latin and trace those roots into the influences of each music type until they get to the music genre that they like. And it allows students to kind of explore in a more open way musical roots and musical direction there, which is just a lot of fun. In this last example, I actually came across this example when I was a student. As I was taking courses on science, there's this concept of like scale in our solar system or in the universe or the galaxy that's just sort of unfathomable, unimaginable by our human brains. And I've seen different ways that people have sort of tried to display or depict how far like our planet is from like the next planet over, how long it would actually take to get there, et cetera, et cetera. But this right here, this concept, if the moon were only 1 pixel, is a website that somebody created that I think is just a wonderful idea. Now, does this apply to your course specifically? Well, maybe unless you're teaching science, probably not. But I could see how allowing students to just painstakingly explore and scroll through the solar system as if the moon were a pixel really allows like that interactive experience to like help you understand how far things are from other things in outer space. And you could just scroll forever and ever and ever. And I could see students spending actually a lot of quality time here just sort of playing and exploring, like, oh yeah, like what does it look like when it gets all the way out to Pluto? Thinking about scale, how big is Pluto compared to, like, I don't know, let's say like Jupiter. So this is really interesting to kind of see that. And I think that there's a lot of free simulations out there that you can pull into your course to allow students to explore virtual things as well. I hope you found these last two examples helpful. Thank you again for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the future workshops. Bye.